The wind picked up, and Kathy put her hair in a ponytail to keep it from whipping in front of her eyes. She needed all her focus for this job. Somehow the Ace Gang had discovered her existence. She had caught the intense and angry lecture the leader had given his men a few nights ago concerning the little silhouette with the hips, while checking up on her radio frequencies, and she only hoped they hadn't come across any of her listening devices. She leaned against a lamppost and watched the clouds roll in and hide the moon. It was going to rain any minute, and if the men didn't leave the warehouse soon, she'd be stuck in the downpour. Fortunately, Kathy had studied this group long enough to know they stuck to a tight schedule, and sure enough, at 10:47 p.m., the doors opened and the crooks went their separate ways, small groups at a time. Just like clockwork, Kathy thought as she waited for the last group to walk to the parking lot and drive off. After waiting a few more minutes for good measure, she made her way quickly and silently into the building. The lack of security cameras made it easy to move through the old warehouse. Soon, she was on the second floor. She stayed in shadow and peered through a small crack in the aging wall's wood paneling to make sure no one was still inside the meeting room. It was empty. She took a deep breath and opened the door, which squeaked loudly on its hinges. The sparsely furnished room had little more than a round table in the middle, with chairs and a combination safe in the corner. With a few minutes, she could easily break the combination and find out the safe's contents. But she didn't care what was in it. That was for the police to worry about, not her. She was here for her bugs. There were two in the room, one disguised as a stone on the solitary flower pot in the windowsill, the other masquerading as one of the pushpins holding up the map of the city on the left wall. Heavy footsteps sounded as she moved toward the map. She stopped dead in her tracks and moved her gaze from the yellow pushpin.
Well, if it isn't little Miss Stealthy,
the owner of the footsteps said with a gruff satisfaction.
Out for a late-night snoop.
Kathy squared her shoulders before turning to face the danger. 3 burly men stood before her, blocking the room's exit. She inwardly berated herself for not suspecting the trap.
Told you it'd work, boys.
One of the men, a shorter, balding one who was obviously the guy in charge, said happily.
All we had to do was wait.
They pushed their way into the room. Kathy took a few steps back, not sure what to do. A taller man took a seat in one of the chairs.
You're not going to find anything, kiddo.
He gestured around the room.
We took everything out of here last week.
The balding man looked her up and down.
So what's your deal, kid? You with the police?
Kathy looked at him.
Not exactly.
Not exactly, he chuckled.
You working for the Clark boys?
No. She shook her head and hid a smirk at the thought of working with the Clark boys. Those 2-bit bounty hunters never caught anyone.
A loner, huh? Well, the boss will be glad to meet you just the same.
He pulled a cigarette from his pocket. Kathy's eyebrows knitted.
I thought you were the boss,
she said with the ploy of getting information.
Nah.
He lit a cigarette and took a puff. A man in the background laughed.
Rex would get a real kick out of that one, Stu. Shut up, Melvin!
Stu almost choked on his smoke.
Go sit down with Frankie and stay quiet.
Kathy wondered if these men were involved in the bank robberies Adam had mentioned. If they were, they could definitely keep their secrets. With all the illegal buzz she picked up on the Ace Gang, bank robberies never hit the radar.
You may want to take a seat too, sister,
Stu said through puffs of smoke. She glanced at the door. With Melvin and Frankie seated at the table, there was an opening to the exit. She scanned the men for signs of concealed weapons. Not seeing any, she took a shot for the door. Bad idea. She made it to the door only to find her way blocked by yet another thug. This one had a knife, and Kathy had a feeling he knew how to use it.
Going somewhere?
The knife wielder asked.
I can't really say.
Kathy made an attempt to pass him, but he pushed her back into the room.
What are you doing here, kid?
Stu asked as if nothing had happened.
Just looking around,
she answered vaguely.
Really?
Stu took another puff.
And do you report to anybody after you look around?
He blew smoke in her face. She waved her hand to block the stream.
Smoking's bad for you,
she said stubbornly. Stu narrowed his eyes, and she immediately regretted her words.
You know, she's right,
Melvin said from his chair. She was beginning to like Melvin. He seemed like he could be helpful if his boss would allow him to speak. Unfortunately, Stu was adamant about keeping him quiet.
I told you to shut it,
he told his lackey angrily.
And I asked you a question,
he said, turning back to Kathy, who had used the distraction as a chance to get closer to the map.
Can you repeat it?
She asked, buying time.
What are you doing poking around here? And who do you work for? Oh, that.
She thought for a moment.
Can we talk about something else?
No, he growled.
We cannot.
The new man threw his knife in Kathy's direction. She ducked to the side before the blade sunk deeply into the map and wall behind it, inches from her head. The man sauntered over and jerked the weapon out of the wood.
You may want to consider cooperating,
he instructed. He leaned beside her against the map and began fiddling with the blade, tossing it in the air and catching it.
I don't work for anyone.
What do we tell the boss? Frankie spoke for the first time in a while. He was clearly agitated.
I don't know. Let's just wait for him. I still don't buy her story.
Stu looked at his phone and went into the hallway. Kathy looked at the safe, now suspecting it contained clues that could link Lawrence Hrax to, if not the robberies, something else illegal.
She's eyeing the safe,
Frankie said abruptly.
She's nothing but a thief, boss.
He sighed.
Women, they all want money. Dorian near cleaned me out last month with all her shopping.
At his mention of the name of his wife, Kathy had a flashback to a year ago when some thug had taken home a bug by mistake. Before she could stop herself, she said,
You know, Frankie, if you would just give her flowers every now and then, your marriage would be a lot happier. Your lack of romanticism is the center of most of your arguments.
The room filled with a deadly silence. All eyes were on her.
You been spying on me?
Frankie sounded both enraged and embarrassed.
Not you personally,
she said tentatively. Frankie rose from his chair.
Then how do you know about my wife?
Kathy squirmed.
I bugged the building.
She figured she might as well say it at this point.
Is it my fault you took one home?
His eyes narrowed.
You been listening in on my personal business?
Her eyes widened. He was angry. The situation was becoming vastly more dangerous.
Not on purpose,
she promised.
Why, you little... Get it, Frankie,
the guy with the knife said.
Is your hearing screwy? What do you mean, Joe?
Melvin piped up again.
I mean,
Joe said, shaking his knife at the room. She's got bugs all over this place. She's listening in on all our jobs. She is working for the police."
No,
She tried to defend herself, but Joe put the knife to her throat. "Shut up, you," he said crossly. "So what, boss? You want to wait for the big guy, or should we offer her now?" Joe had cruel eyes, and he held an unhealthy esteem for his blade. Confusion crossed his face, however, when his boss gave no answer. "Boss?" he said, eyes still on Kathy. "Hey, Stu, what do you think?"
I think you should let her go."
The voice that answered was not Stu's. The three men turned. Kathy looked at the doorway. The blue shadow stood, holding a crushed cell phone. Stu's unconscious body lying at his feet. Joe rushed the hero with his knife at the ready. Blue deflected the blade with his gloved forearm, and knocked the attacker to the floor, but not out. Joe jumped back to his feet and threw a hard punch that caught Blue across the jaw. Blue feigned injury, crouching down. "This loser a friend of yours?" Frankie asked Kathy snidely. Instead of answering, she kicked the failed family man square in the face, sending him to his knees. The distraction was enough for Blue to make his move on Joe. He sprung up and barreled towards the now weaponless gangster. His bullet-fast reflexes allowed him to thwart each of Joe's surprised attempts at fighting back, as he was thrown through the window, narrowly missing the flower pot on the way. Joe was able to scramble and grab hold of the windowsill. Melvin rushed to help him back inside, which left only Frankie, eye already beginning to blacken from Kathy's kick. He swung his fist, but Blue was ready. Slapping aside Frankie's hand with his own, Blue struck the man in the gut with his own fist, and then cold-cocked him for good measure. With two of the four gangsters now unconscious, and the other two preoccupied, Blue looked to Kathy. "Ready to leave?" She pulled a pin from the corner of the map behind her, then, to his amazement, went quickly to the window. Joe grumbled some incoherent threat as she retrieved the bug from the flower pot. "Bye, Melvin," she waved before she turned and ran out the door with the blue shadow.